The Not Hero DLC for Resident Evil 7 was an amazing experience, and it did leave a lot of questions as well as answer some questions in terms of story. Today, we're going to be talking about the DLC, what story it did answer, what story it didn't answer, and leave open for interpretation throughout Village and beyond. If you have any thoughts about the Not Hero DLC and your opinions of how good or bad you think it was, do let me know. And if you are new around here and want to see more Resident Evil content every single day and streams every single weekend, drop a subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss a video or a stream. And without any further ado, let's get into the DLC and what the return of Chris Redfield to the series meant for the future. So the Not Hero DLC picks up immediately after the events of Resident Evil 7. This is when Ethan and Mia have been evacuated from the Baker estate and sent off to kind of be cured and kind of looked after. Meanwhile, Chris and his team, well, Chris actually alone, is sent into the mines to find Lucas Baker, who is in talks with the Connections. At the time of the DLC being released, the only things we really know about the Connections are the fact that Mia was in some way involved with them, and they are the reason that Evelyn kind of escaped and broke free and, caused everything that happened. But this DLC does kind of briefly go into more detail about who they are, and we'll go over that in a future video. I do want to make a video solely about the Connections and everything we know as of now. But just for today, we're going to talk about the DLC, how it plays out, what's good about it, what's not so great about it, and just jump into all of that good stuff. Okay, so let's get the most controversial point of the DLC out of the way, and that is Chris's face, dude. What happened? I know a lot of people, when Chris turned up at the end of 7, there was bounties of videos about, just how he looked, and even as far as going, is that really Chris? Is that Chris Redfield? Obviously the DLC did kind of answer that question when they called him Chris about 20 times, and that theory was debunked. It was Chris, and people kind of wondered what happened to his design. They definitely fixed it in Village. He definitely looks like how he used to, at least an older version of what he used to look like. He even has his ripped arms, but in this one, they changed the face for some reason. But that is but a blip on this DLC, because the story and the gameplay is incredible. So through Chris's travels, he finds these remaining members of a team that went down to find Lucas in traps upon traps upon traps, and as Chris does throughout his time in the games, they all die. He cannot save them, which they need to stop doing that to Chris, honestly. Everyone he meets tends to die, but that's just a curse, I guess, of Chris Redfield. But in doing so, gives him the means to get through the mines, deeper into the mines, by giving him, an extra bit of oxygen to breathe. He gets night vision goggles, and that manages to get him through Lucas' set of traps and just contaminated areas of the mines caused by the molded. On the topic of Lucas, he's the last remaining Baker alive, except Zoe, who we don't see until later on in the end of Zoe DLC, and he is in talks with the Connections. He is involved with them in some ways. I believe he essentially kept tabs on Evelyn for them, and in exchange they kind of helped him break free of her control. In the very least, he didn't get entirely cured. He's still molded, but Evelyn didn't really have any influence over his kind of actions. He was kind of doing his own thing. So he is kind of helping the Connections with, keeping track of Evelyn and stuff like that, which is a very interesting point. I did think, especially after the end of the main game, that Lucas would return in the future as a bigger villain. But now I'm kind of glad they dealt with all the Bakers in one go. So it was a fitting end for Lucas's character. I think Lucas was one of the stronger characters in Resident Evil 7, more based around the DLC and just how in-depth of a character he really was. Another thing that came up in this DLC that has actually kind of disappeared after the release of Village is the new Umbrella. Now, as you all know, Umbrella are the reason for all of this gloriness, which we see as the Resident Evil series. They are the ones that caused the outbreak, they are the ones that caused the zombies multiple times, and this new Umbrella is essentially out there to kind of clear the company's name and kind of make up for the actions that the original founders and the original company did to, you know, Raccoon City and Africa and all that kind of thing. Chris, throughout the DLC, you can tell he's very hesitant to be working with them, which, you know, makes sense because he's been fighting Umbrella since the very beginning, and now to be working with them, with the BSAA, it's a very different, you know, change of pace for him, which I get. The weird part is, Umbrella, well, this new Umbrella at least, is not mentioned in Village. The BSAA become a very, very, very important part of the story near the end, and I'll get into that in a future video, because the connections, the BSAA and the Rose Winters are videos I want to talk about, you know, solely about those things in 3 different videos, and they are coming along quite nicely right now. But the Blue Umbrella kind of disappeared, and I'm sure it'll be back. I'm sure they'll establish more of it in the future. But it is strange that, you know, they made a big deal about Umbrella being this brand new reformed company, and then they just don't exist in Village. Not even Chris mentions them when he's in the game, which is odd to me. But aside from the story, the gameplay itself is brilliant. You really feel like you're playing Chris again with his massive OP punch. He uses that multiple times in this DLC, just through the means of stunning enemies. You can punch them across the map. In terms of the enemy types and stuff like that, you have obviously all the molded you're familiar with, alongside some new ones, which are called the, well, I think they're just called white molded. These are like unstoppable, regenerated ones that can only be taken down with a certain amount of ammo, and you're limited to how many you can use, which adds obviously to the attention quite a lot. The final boss with Lucas is incredibly fun. I think his design, his boss design, is incredible. It's actually quite challenging, especially on normal and professional if you haven't done it first time through. So it's definitely a challenge. Speaking about professional, from what I've heard, it is no easy task. So anyone who enjoys playing the hard difficulty Resident Evil modes all the time will have a blast with it, I'm sure. In terms of length, about an hour if you're kind of capable in terms of, you know, playing the game, which I'm sure if you've played all the way through 11 and then play the DLC, you'll have no issue with. And it's all around a general good way to end the story of Resident Evil 7 until Ender Zoe comes in and kind of just not ends the story, but kind of just ties up some loose ends. Because essentially, at the end of this, the Baker story is done, and then they have the Zoe bit in to kind of fully round out any missing plot point with her. But the DLC is great. And again, if you haven't played this, I would really recommend you do. This is a free DLC. The DLC was meant to be in the game not long after launch, but got delayed just a little bit. So we had to wait a little bit when the game first came out. But I promise you, it is a lot of fun to play, and you will not be disappointed with the length and the challenge and the characters and even the story. Apart from, again, some missing answers and things like that, it is a lot of fun. Again, in terms of tone for this DLC, we've mentioned tone in the previous videos about DLCs for the game. This is obviously an action-focused entry into the DLC. Resident Evil 7 as a whole is not too action-focused. It is very much a horror game in terms of tone it's going for and set pieces and stuff like that. So there's a nice change of pace from that. Resource management isn't really noticeable here. You're given enough to get by in all situations in normal mode at the very least. So yeah, it is indeed a highly action-focused DLC. Some people might not like that because some people prefer their Resident Evil game to be spooky and tense. But yeah, it's only a small part of 7, so I think it is worth playing through and enjoying. I personally really enjoyed it. I recently streamed it again. So if you want to catch the full stream, it is up on the channel. Be sure to go check that out. I'll leave a link in the description for that if you want to go check that out. And yeah, overall, I would say very, very strong DLC. Good way of reintroducing the character. Definitely a lot of questions still need to be answered even now after Village is launched. All this time later. But I'm sure maybe through DLC for 7 or through Resident Evil 9 or Outrage that comes out, maybe we'll get some answers. But for now, those questions remain, and I will be making videos on those things in due time. So make sure to keep an eye out for those. But this has been a kind of brief look at Not Hero nowadays. Again, definitely recommend checking it out if you have the opportunity. One quick little note I do want to mention. This is obviously ideal for anyone who hasn't played this game. if you have a PS5, the game is free. It is free on the PlayStation Plus collection. You get these games when you get a PS5. There's a whole host of games on there, but Resident Evil 7 is one of them. And by having the game, you'll have access to Not a Hero, as well as the whole main game. None of the DLC is concluded, but you have the game for free. So I would recommend checking it out if you haven't already. But either way, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow for a brand new video.